Thanks very much for having me. My name is Richard Freund. I've just finished my PhD at the University of Cape Town, and I'm also a research associate at a company called Media Development. I'm going to be one of the few papers, I think, not focusing on Africa, presenting some work with colleague Rafael Novella at University College London and David Rosas-Shady at the Inter-American Development Bank on a job training program in Peru. So very briefly on the motivation, just really this is grounded in the context of very high levels of informality, in particular in Latin America, and particularly among youth workers. And so in light of this, a number of countries in Latin America, but around the world, are implementing kind of a new form of job training called digital skills bootcamps or coding bootcamps. And despite their kind of growing popularity, there's very limited rigorous evidence on their effectiveness, and we try to analyze this in the context of Peru. So I'm going to skip my overview, just to tell you a little bit more about bootcamp programs. So these are job training programs that try to combine characteristics of traditional job training with the intensity of military boot camps, is what they say. So they're typically very intensive, rapid skills training programs lasting typically 3 to 6 months. Their teaching methodology is very much a hands-on approach. So they usually focus on kind of digital skills, often coding skills, and so it's a lot of kind of learning by coding, doing examples, collaborative learning. And they're usually implemented by private sector bodies, and so their curricula are meant to be tailored to reflect kind of current industry needs. And it's been growing in popularity. Kind of most recent estimates suggest that in 2023 there were just over 60,000 graduates of these very intensive and as you'll see, rather expensive programs. And so in 2022-23, the Peruvian Ministry of Employment and Promotion of Labor launched the Jóvenes Bicentenario program, which was a digital skills bootcamp program where they provided selected participants technical training in this bootcamp of approximately 400 hours, so it was intense, over 3 months. It was provided by local bootcamp providers in one of 4 tracks: web development programming, mobile and game development, data analytics, or digital marketing growth and design. So they were all focused on kind of these advanced digital skills. In addition to this, participants received some training from the Ministry in employability or socio-emotional skills for employment, and they also had some labor intermediation support. All instruction was online, so it was fully online on their platforms, and it was from about October 2022 until the end of the year. The target population was young people, so 18 to 29, who were in Peru, had completed high school, but were not currently enrolled in higher education or were employed at the time. And so it's kind of not the most vulnerable people at all, but it's people who weren't in higher education or employed. I say here the cost of the bootcamp was relatively low. This is in the context of digital skills bootcamp, so it was still expensive at around $1,300 per student, but the typical cost of the program is around $9,500 globally, so they're very intense but very expensive kind of job training programs. This one was slightly lower, largely due to online instruction as well as the use of local bootcamp providers. To evaluate the impact of the program, we embedded an individual level randomized control trial during applications to the program. So the first point of application was done through an online form. Eligible applicants then were required to take a competency test assessing various kind of cognitive and non-cognitive skills. Those who then passed the ministry's threshold were then provided to the bootcamp providers themselves, who conducted their own selection tests. So you can see it's an extremely rigorous and selective process, and that is one of the characteristics of bootcamps. So there were many applicants, over 30,000, but in the end our experimental sample was 1,000 individuals randomly allocated to receive the training, the treatment group. We had a control group of 665, and then we had a replacement group of around 10%, and some of these ended up kind of taking some of the treatment places when individuals who were offered treatment declined to kind of take their spots up. So for the data, we combine the application data, kind of serves as our baseline data. We get treatment data from the training providers themselves, and then our outcomes data largely comes from government administrative tax data, the Planilla Electronica, which is derived from formal tax submissions of firms, very similar to the SA Tide data in the South African context. So it's formal labor market outcomes. And then in particular, to try and understand some informal work outcomes, we conducted a follow-up phone survey 2 years after the training. And as is common though with phone surveys, we had relatively high attrition, and this was differential in levels between treatment and control, so we tried to do a bunch of bounds around this just to try and understand in particular informal work. Yeah, just to say the formal labor market outcomes are, having a formal job. So if you're in the data set in any of these months in the tax submissions, your formal labor income. But then we're really interested also in occupational upgrading. Does this kind of training in advanced digital skills lead people to get jobs in better occupations and particularly tech jobs? And so we focus here on whether they appear in the data set in the first, second, or third ISCO occupational groups, kind of these more high-skilled roles, as well as if they work in a computer analyst or a programmer. There are kind of 11 occupations linked to this in the data in an entry-level technology occupation. Generally, we estimate ITT effects. We use an indicator for if you're ever offered treatment. We include kind of randomization strata and a whole bunch of baseline control variables selected using post-double selection lasso. We also control for kind of pre-treatment formal labor market outcomes in the administrative tax data. And just to say, to maximize statistical power for our main results, we pool information kind of from all months after the treatment period, but I'll also show some more dynamic treatment effects. Yeah, I won't spend long on this, but just to say in the survey data, we do a bunch of different bounds to try correct for differential attrition in the spirit of Lee, but also some more kind of formal bounds of Behagal, which uses the number of phone call attempts in the survey as well. Our treatment take-up, I think, was relatively high, completion. We had around 60% who kind of completed the courses, which is much higher than most online training programs, particularly other ones we've done in Latin America. Part of the reason we think about this is because kind of it's a highly select group already, and so I think there's kind of a lot of the selection has already been done there, and obviously these people were also not employed or enrolled at the time, and so there's lower opportunity costs to finishing this. Cool. So on the results, we find no effects on the probability of working in a formal job or on your formal income. Right? So we find no average effects there. What we do find is strong evidence of occupational upgrading. We find treated individuals are significantly more likely to be working in a high-skilled job, and in particular in an entry-level tech job. So these are not huge, ITT effects, let's say, in absolute magnitude, but compared to the control group mean, they are meaningful. It's around I think a 12% increase for high-skilled job and almost a 90% increase for entry-level tech jobs, albeit from a very low base. Looking at dynamic effects over time, the red dotted over there is kind of the beginning of the treatment period. We find very strong effects of kind of negative lock-in effects during the treatment period for both formal employment and formal income. But in particular for high-skilled job and really entry-level tech job, we find kind of very stable pre-treatment periods around the zero, and then we find increasing over the post-treatment period pretty consistently for entry-level tech job and also a bit for high-skilled jobs, although the estimate there appears a bit more noisy. Just to say for survey data, we find largely the same kind of narrative qualitatively in that we find no significant effects on extensive margin or income, although we do find positive point estimates that are pretty imprecisely estimated. But we find significant effects on people having a higher probability of working in a programming or data job, which was a variable externally classified by EPA, or for individuals reporting that they use advanced digital skills in their job. So it does seem to be, in our sense, pushing some individuals towards kind of more entry-level tech jobs. And I think one of the most interesting results is our heterogeneity by the type of bootcamp. And so for all bootcamps except mobile and game development, we find significant positive effects on high-skilled jobs and on entry-level tech jobs. But for mobile and game development, we actually find a consistently negative effect. We have very limited evidence on this, but the qualitative evidence we do have suggests that at least participants don't perceive it to be less valuable or less high quality in the content itself. But we have evidence from external firm data that the demand for these kind of skills in Peru is actually really low for mobile and game development. And so it may be a sense just of limited local labor demand of people trying to find high-skilled jobs that they can't find. I'm not going to take your question just for time. Last point is just to say heterogeneity by gender. We find clear heterogeneity with positive effects across the board for males. For females, we find some evidence of occupational upgrading, but we find negative effects on the probability of formal employment and formal income. And we try to use some of the evidence from the survey data to show that it appears to be, at least in some part, shifts towards informal flexible work. Women in particular are more likely to work in informal tech work, informal work that requires advanced digital skills, and in particular informal flexible work. And so it may have allowed women to take some remote jobs or some flexible jobs in these high-skilled areas that still allow them to maintain kind of flexibility and autonomy. Cool, thank you very much.
questions?
Okay, now I'll take a question.
I'm sorry, I had forgotten you had 10 minutes only.
No worries, that's why I was speeding through.
Yeah, I depart from the understanding that if you were treated, then the probability of you being, high skilled, sort of, graduate is high. Why would it be that you are not? I mean, they don't necessarily work in the formal sector, but then they work in the high skilled sort of sector.
Are you saying, sorry, just to understand, they could not be working in the formal sector, but they could still be working in a highly skilled job just informally?
Yeah, just informally.
Yeah, 100%. No, I think I agree with you there, and sorry, I didn't have time to look over, I didn't even include it over here, but we look at it, these are from the survey data, and we look at informal work more carefully, and you can see on average the kind of our main estimate is around a 1 percentage point increase in informal work on average. It's pretty imprecisely estimated. We also look on average to see whether individuals are informally working in these kind of programming and data jobs and advanced digital skills jobs. And on average, we don't find evidence of that. But as I said, for women, we do find significant increases in informal, what looks like highly skilled work. And so I think there's definitely a subset of the treated group that are using this to not go into formal work, but still find highly skilled, informal, or kind of freelancing opportunities or something like that. I think there definitely is something in there.
It's their choice.
Yeah, exactly, it's their choice. And for women, again, we don't know here whether these are structural barriers or the reasons they're doing this, or because this is a preference or a mixture of both. But it's something we are seeing, yeah.
Very good work. I like the presentation.
Thanks.
I would consider doing something like a cost effectiveness analysis. What it can
yes.
do, it's $1,300, but how much did it add in the lifetime earnings of those kids, basically?
Yeah.
Considering the counterfactual, you can estimate that if we kind of expand this intervention throughout the country, this is in billions of dollars in value added, how much we get.
Okay, thanks. That's a great point, actually. So we do a very simple kind of cost-benefit analysis following some work by Atanasio and others in kind of Colombia on a similar training program, and we find positive kind of internal rates of returns for data analytics and digital marketing growth and design, and clearly negative for particularly mobile and game development, but even web development programming. But we don't then equate this even with a back of the envelope calculation into kind of billions of dollars or something. Maybe that's a bit more tangible. So thanks, it's a good suggestion. Cool. Thank you very much.